Hi, and welcome everyone to this episode of The Purpose Turn. Today, I have the immense pleasure to welcome Alise Cortez, or I should say Dr. Alise Cortez. Welcome, Alise.
Thank you so much, Doctor, as well. Happy to be on the other end of the mic.
Thank you so much for being here. So, Alise and I had a conversation before this official live where I got to know a little bit about her background. And I found that the experience that she had in her life relates to what a lot of us are going through, which is a phase where we are trying to figure out what is it? Because we know that the current thing that we're doing in our careers might not be it, but wondering what could it be. What's unique about her background and her life experience is that she not only had one of these experiences, but several. And that through that, she not only became an expert on the topic, but also wrote various books on this very experience that we all share. With that, Alise, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
For sure, Ingo. So essentially, I'm getting to do the work that is the best work of my life. It is an expression of my purpose, and it was born of my own pains, my own ailing. And so today, there's really two pieces of work that I do today that complement each other. One is we help organizations to develop inspirational leaders and then also cultures that are activated by the purpose of the organization, which generates gusto, the performance of gusto. So that's our chief contribution and signature work. In addition to that, I'm also what's called a Vistage chair. And Vistage is a 70-year-old organization that helps business owners, CEOs, business leaders to develop and work on themselves and their businesses so that they can make better decisions, have better results, and become better humans in the process. So that's a peer advisory kind of a group that I run here in Dallas. So those are the two aspects of work that I do. But essentially the combination of them, Ingo, is it's really about helping to champion people to awaken to their passion and their purpose, and then to pursue their potential in their lives to make a contribution that is worthy of their one precious life.
Amazing. And I know that this is not just theoretical for you. It comes from a lifetime of experience. And I want you to share a little bit about how that discovery went for you, starting at a place in time, and maybe you can help contextualize that when you had probably everything that an overworked mid-career professional would dream of. A house, a gardener, a sunny destination, no obligation in the world, and all the time you want it to yourself.
Yeah. So that would be my mid-20s, Ingo. So I grew up in a small town in Northeastern Oregon. I find myself in Portland, Oregon. And in my mid-20s, I find my way into college and I'm studying my bachelor's degree. Meet my then boyfriend, who within a month of knowing him said, "Hey, my company, an oil and gas company, is going to move me to Madrid, Spain. And I think you should come with me." And I reviewed the Rolodex there for a minute. I went, look, I'm a college student. I don't have any debt. I don't have any career. I think I'm going to say yes to this. And I'm so glad I said yes to this. It was an incredible experience, Ingo. I'm 26 years old. We land in Madrid, Spain. We literally gallivant all over Western Europe on the company's dollar as we're doing his work, which was to add AM, PM convenience store concept to the gas stations. And then after 6 months, the company said, "Hey, we're going to move you now to Rio de Janeiro." I'm like, sweet. Now I've got French, Spanish. Now we're going to go do Portuguese. So, he's like a top dog in this company. So we have literally a full-time chauffeur, a live-in maid, and a gardener, and are now gallivanting all over South America and seeing that part of the world. It was just amazing. And so he would go off during the day and work, and I didn't have a visa, so I was working on my education. I had a lot of time, as you said, to myself. And it was a beautiful existence. There was so much about it that was so incredibly, achingly beautiful. And there was so much of it that left me so empty. And what I discovered, what first I would say is that our maid, Dalva, she was an amazing human, took such good care of us. She would oftentimes find me crying, sobbing in the house. And I know she thought to herself, what is this crazy white bitch crying about? She's got everything in the world. Why is she crying? And it was just this overwhelming, what I now understand is an existential emptiness that I felt. And what I've since learned about it, Ingo, was that all I was doing was I was consuming a really beautiful life. And what I now know as a logotherapist, which is activating meaning in life, is that what we need as humans is we need to be of service. We need to be giving something of ourselves that matters. And when we do that, now we have vitality. And I didn't have that. I was consuming a really beautiful life. And it nearly eviscerated my soul.
At least not to distract from your story, but I want to clarify something. Like consuming life, yes, but then being of service. If somebody's out there almost at the brink of burnout, giving more in order to feel purposeful almost sounds counterintuitive. Can you explain that for us?
Such a great question. So here's the thing, and this is something that I know again through my work as a logotherapist. So we register meaning along our value system. So what you find meaningful will be different from what I find meaningful because we have different values. So what's generally happening when we experience burnout is one, we're running and gunning too hard and too fast. That's unsustainable. Or more likely, we're doing some kind of work that doesn't really align with and allow us to express our values. So if we are living and expressing our values through our work, it's not going to be nearly as likely to cause burnout, unless, of course, we're just overdoing it, just physically, just too many hours in
Mm,
a day. But that feeling of really getting to live your life through what's important to you, what you value, is where you get that vitality.
mm. So, if I understand you correctly, when I do things that are aligned with what I intrinsically value, what I find most important,
Yes.
the work is more likely to fuel me because I recognize this as important and worthwhile. Versus if I just have to do things that I didn't choose or that I don't find that valuable at an increased pressure, I'm starting to burn out because there's nothing that's fueling me from the work. There's no meaning in the work.
Perfect. 100% exactly right. That's exactly it.
Okay, so you realized, even though it's beautiful, there's nothing that you value on a deeper level, that you find meaning in during that time in Brazil. Is that right?
Yeah, and so ultimately what I did was I just work hard and focus on my studies, and that was a useful way to utilize and channel that energy. But ultimately, after 3 years of being in that relationship and living abroad together, I ultimately chose to leave, because it was so empty and so vacuous that I didn't like who I was becoming as I was sliding down this chasm into nothingness.
Mm,
I wasn't a good version of myself. I didn't like who I was being. And he and I were not in a good place. He was riding high in his job and I was aching to be of service, to matter in some way. And I wasn't. And so the only way to get out of that for me was to leave the country, leave the relationship. I went back to Portland. And here's what's amazing about that, if I look back on it. So when I left Portland, I was waiting tables while I was going through college. That's how I met my boyfriend. He was a customer. So when I moved back to Portland, I went back to the same restaurant to help get my job again. So because I needed to just figure out how to reentry. This person had changed and grown so much, and I didn't know how to put her back into where I came from. So I
mm,
went back to what I knew, and that was waiting tables. But then I also was halfway through my master's degree in international relations with South America, and I needed to do like part-time work, and so I could just throw myself into that and get it done. So what I did was I bought a high-end residential cleaning business. And I did that half time and I made really good money at it and I could sustain myself. So I went from having a maid and everything else to being a maid. And that internal work of allowing myself to step back into my world and just realign with who am I? What do I care about? What do I stand for? Where am I going? And let me have wind in my own sail versus being the flag in somebody else's wind made all the difference for me.
yeah. And just based on this short conversation that we had so far, I can see the importance of a mental challenge. But then on the other hand, also wanting to be of service. Would you say that's a value of yours?
Well, definitely. Yeah. My number one value is significance. I want to matter in the world. I want to serve. I want to lift at least 1 million lives before I'm dropped into the ground. But
Yeah.
if we fast forward, I move to Portland and then I get the sales job and then I get promoted. I get to move to Seattle. And now I've got it's even more responsibility, more money, and it's great, but it's easy work. And there's no thinking in it. I mean, I was
Mm,
selling, literally what I was doing was I was selling trainloads of baking flour to bakeries in California.
mhm,
Easy money, comfortable, etcetera. But again, I was like, "Is this all there is? There must be more to this than this
mm,
beautiful thing called life than this. Yes, I have a nice car. Yes, I have a nice house. Yes, I'm doing vacations, but this can't be it." And so I consider my options. I mean, I could always have an affair with some cute person in the warehouse. I could, buy a sports car. I could go off to India to go spend time at an ashram. But I didn't choose those things, Ingo. What I chose to do was to pursue a PhD. That was my answer to that early midlife crisis was to another crisis. As you were saying, they kind of repeated. And that turned out to really set me on the right path is I pursued what I really, really valued. I pursued learning and growing and helping
Mm.
others to realize their potential and grow them as humans. Okay, now we've stepped onto the right lily pad. This is the place for me. And that made all the difference.
Yeah. So in retrospective and like you narrating along your values, it sound like perfectly clear, right? But at the time, how did you figure out what was misaligned? And how did you figure out that the PhD is the thing?
Well, the process that I've discovered, which became like an internal divining rod for me, is this process that I've since learned to call unfolding. It was just this thing where every step that I took, like I felt like, like I'm blindly going through an alley, but somehow there was some kind of direction that told me to put my right foot on this lily pad and then the left foot on this lily pad. And every step that I took, I just unfolded into more of who I really am. It was a really natural unfoldment process. And the more I went through that path, and once I studied meaning and work and identity, and then later augmented that research, I guess it was about 10 years or 8 years later, it was so compelling, Ingo, that feeling of like, being so pulled by this. This is exactly the direction I'm supposed to go. There's no other choice for me. This is it. Once I learned to hear that, to feel that, and to give myself over to it, then the process became really much faster. There was so much more movement and unfoldment and expression in the work that I was doing and how specific I was being, especially around helping leaders and organizations to activate meaning and purpose for themselves, which is the pain that I had for myself. That's what I mean is that ailing, that itch to have meaning in my life. That's what I now help organizations and leaders do for themselves is to help to scratch that itch for meaning and purpose.
And I understand the metaphor with the lily pad and one step in front of the other, and your description of going in. And conceptually, I get it, but what does that mean in practice? So, if like I'm just trying to empathize with somebody out there who's listening, who's like, yeah, I get it. I know that what's in front of me is not what I want. And I know that there is something else, but I don't know what it is. So how can I start this? And what does she mean by connecting with or stepping on the next lily pad? What is that like?
Well, I think there's two components of it, Ingo. There's both the stillness where you have to be still enough to be able to hear or feel the nudge or hear the whisper. And then also, I think you really need some kind of catalyst, something that catalyzes. It could be your misery, like it was for me, or it could be somebody knocks on your door and waves or something or dangles something in front of you, or like, "Ooh, I like that a lot." Maybe you had never seen it before, but it got introduced to you through that catalyzing agent. And so for me, the way that it happened was I would say that I did my PhD and finished it in 2005. But the meaning and work and identity research that I did really was the heart. And I knew that was part of this gurgling awakening process that was trying to help me go someplace. And every time I presented on it, people they loved it. They just couldn't get enough of it. So I knew I was on the right path. I had that feedback that what I had done somehow made sense to people and helped people. But
Mm,
then when I somehow saw an ad to start teaching as an adjunct faculty in psychology classes for the University of Phoenix in 2011. And there it was, that pull was like, yeah, ooh, that's it. I want to do that. Right. That's
yeah,
what's missing is that intellectual educational component. So being aware enough. So that's a catalyzing agent. Seeing that ad, somehow finding it, that catalyzed my attention. I applied for it. I started teaching. And as soon as I was in the classroom, then you go, then I was immediately, then it was like, ooh, I got to go back to that research. I got to augment that research. Now that I've tasted this world again. So you can see how it builds, right?
yeah, it
So
builds momentum.
it's a matter of, being present enough that you can see these things that get dangled in front of you and then allow them to catalyze action. Where am I
Mm,
going next? Choices. Where am I going next? So once I was in the classroom, then I was like, all right, now we're going to go back and we're going to augment that PhD dissertation research that had 25 people in it, and we're going to take it to 115. And when I did that and I added the layers of meaning in it, then I had these 15 modes of engagement, which became a part of the body of my work today. You see what I mean is you have to be still enough to be able to hear the whisper or feel the nudge. And then when you get the catalysts in front of you, allow them to move you, to compel you, and do something,
yeah.
decide, act something, make a call, have a conversation, apply for the job, whatever it is.
Right. I can really see how, in the way you laid out for us, momentum built.
Yes.
Right. It's almost like a dance that you have with the opportunity you engage with, and not necessarily going with your logic, but
Mm-mm.
going with how you feel stimulated. Like, oh,
Yes.
that's exciting. Let me do a little bit of that. And then we all know when we're excited, we engage in something, and that confirms our suspicion in a positive way where we're like,
Yes.
oh, yeah, that felt so good. I want more of that and more of that and more of that. And almost like letting that momentum build to carry you.
Yes, yes. And what I would say too, because sometimes the sensation you feel isn't excitement, it's fear, it scares. You're scared,
Mm,
but it's because it matters to you, right? So anything that awakens you like that, it awakens you to excitement, or you're like, I could never do that. That's telling you something. And
mm.
many of us, it's so easy to just kind of try to erase that because it's uncomfortable. What do I do with that intensity? Well, allow it to tell you what it's trying to tell you, where it's trying to pull you to.
Do you have a specific moment in time where that showed up in that second part when you went for the PhD and then eventually did your defense and then scaled that to bigger stages and audiences? Is there something where you're like, yeah, that was really a significant life event that showed me that this is the path?
Yeah, they just kept going, as I've seen. I keep having these like little mini sort of crises, I guess, and I would call them an inflection, transition, maybe growth points. But, once I did this postdoc augmented research and I had these 15 modes of engagement, and that's the other thing is once you start stepping into this, then you start getting, reactions. People react to you. People are called to what you're doing, or they like what you're doing, and they like the energy that you're doing around it. So I had these 15 modes of engagement. Now it's the middle of 2014. I know that I'm going to go to a business conference in New Delhi, India in December to present the results. This was on my bucket list. I'm like, India is where I want to go to India. I love Indian food, people, culture. This is a no brainer. I'm going 3 weeks. So this is already, on my docket. So now I'm getting published with my results around the meeting and work research that I had done. And then in November of that year, I get a call to help an organization. They wanted somebody to come in and do something for the end of their end of the year that was celebratory and engaging. So I said, "Hey, I've got this brand new research. I could create something like from that." And they're like, "Oh, that'd be great. Do that." So I go deliver this half day session for them, and Ingo, they loved it, and I was so high on it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's there! It is affirmation again that this is good. People like it. It's on the right track." And I kid you not, Ingo, I'm driving home high as a kite from this experience, and my phone rings, and it's Voice America calling to ask would I like to host my own show. And I just pulled the phone away from my ear and I went, this is all connected. The research, India, this workshop I just left, and now back then it was called radio 11 and a half years ago. And once I was like, I'm going to say yes to this opportunity and just see who shows up.
Mm,
So the show is called Working on Purpose. You'll soon be a guest on this. And once I did that, it was again, it just then the momentum just kept getting bigger and louder and faster and stronger. And once I did that, there was no turning back. Then it was, moving down the path of really developing, writing the books, creating the programs, developing a methodology to help organizations to discover their purpose embedded into their culture, speaking on these topics. I mean, it was just the train had left the station and was moving down the tracks.
amazing. It sounds like a happy ever after story. And I think many of us want that. And I wondered, when you were telling this, just reflecting on my own experience, what does she do in times when, because I think living your life in this way requires a good amount of belief
Huge
in
amount of
that
belief.
things will unfold. And due to our education, especially me, like business background, strategy is the pinnacle, right? Got to have a destination, you got to have a plan on how to reach it, and then you execute. And so for me, it almost seems like the opposite of what we have been told, but that might just be surface level.
No, it is exactly opposite of what we've been told. This is how we are absolutely reared in our education system and our society to be compliant, to go and get a predictable, stable job, save your money and retire. That is what is being taught. So I went off the script to do it this way. 100%. This is not standard issue. I didn't have a plan, Ingo. I was here's where I came to. It's like, I am not gonna get to the end of my one precious life, not knowing when the exit ramp is coming, not having gone for my gusto.
Mm,
And I just wasn't willing to do that. I wasn't willing to take the easy path that would have been easier for me to find a job and just, make the money or whatever. I could not live with myself. Now, I
mm,
would tell you too, part of this whole journey, in my instance, also did cost my marriage. He wanted me to have more of that kind of a life, a full-time job with a nice benefit package and all that. And I just could not move away from this being compelled by the meaning and the purpose and what that life could be and how I could be of service through that lens. I could not ignore
mm,
that. And I will tell you the path to monetizing how you matter, which is what the whole process is not easy and it's not for the faint of heart. And oftentimes we need help to be able to figure out how to do that. And I've enrolled a lot of people over the years to help me with that because it isn't natural and it isn't obvious at all. But man, is it worth it.
So what I'm hearing is that there is no better path. Like if you want to go for the corporate 9 to 5 security, predictability, there's merit to it, but there's also cost to it. And instead of saying like this is better, you could say like there's also option B, right? But option B has its own kind of trade-offs. And so coming back to what you said earlier about values, I think it requires clarity and certainty in what's most important to you in order to venture down the path and then stay on that path.
Yeah, and be true to that and give yourself over to that truth. And
Mm,
that is what I did. And that is what's allowed me to persevere as I have and to create the number of things that I have for our business. But yes, now to be really clear, there's a tremendous segment of people who really do value stability and security. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is what they value. That's what makes them happy. That's what makes them able
right.
to serve their families and be good and kind humans and serve their communities. That's fantastic. It just wasn't my choice.
Mm,
And a lot of the people that I associate with, that's not their choice either because they want to live, do work that is an expression of who they really are and what their purpose is. And that's the path that I chose
mm,
because it was more important to me to be true to that because I feel like I really am being of service for why I was created. I'm being obedient to that.
mm,
And there's a purity in living that way, and it allows me to access some of the deepest gifts that I've never been able to access before. There's a strength there, there's an that people will often remark on that I wasn't giving when I was just doing my other skills.
mm, Do you know what makes it that way?
Yeah, I think that it is an expression of your soul. Sometimes people have said to me, "I can feel your soul," or "I wanna touch your soul. It's coming out in your work."
Wow.
That is yeah, I mean, that I wasn't doing that when I was just training things around strengths and communication kind of stuff. But when I'm out working with people and helping them to discover what's meaningful for them, how do they activate their sources of meaning so that they are stoked with that necessary energy to go and pursue their passions and their purpose. And what is their purpose? And people cry. They get both sad but also really moved by the message.
Mm.
And I think it's because I'm drawing from my truest essence. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I think experiencing the presence of somebody who's like very connected with self, very authentic. And I think that's probably an experience we can all relate to, right? And feeling like, yeah, that person is here. Like the whole person is here. It's not, there's no corporate mask, there's no role.
Right,
It's
right.
just like, this is who they are. There's something in that experience, being around somebody like yourself that is incredibly liberating, but also challenging because it holds up a mirror and asks, how am I living? How am I showing up? And maybe also a desire to show up in this way because let's face it, fulfilling a role or holding up a mask or whatever you want to call it, that's tiring. I also want to come back to because I feel like I started us off on creating a dichotomy while it's, I think, in reality, more of a gradient, right?
I like that.
So there are people who, even in a corporation, who we interact with, where we feel like they are their authentic self. And maybe we envy them a little bit for being that and for being able to show up like that. And here I'm wondering about your experience, Alise, on an everyday base, not just when it comes to the big life questions, but when it comes to the interactions that we have with people, the water cooler talks, if we have them, or the Zoom chats or whatever it is, right? How do you started to cultivate that? How did you start to show up as you and as what you believe in and hold on to that?
I guess I would say that as I got braver in sharing that, I just kept getting so much affirmation from other people that they appreciated it, that it was refreshing, that it just built on itself, right? I didn't the few people that I got resistance from were the people that didn't really want to be in my lives. And they weren't people that I wanted, wanted their affirmation from, if you will. So it just kept building, and so for me, I mean, I really am, there's no separation between who I am and the work I do. It is indistinguishable and inseparable. And so therefore, the way that I move through life, I mean, I love getting to be who I am, the vessel that I have been created with and through for, when I'm out and about doing just everyday little things. Like, for example, walking into the Tom Thumb grocery store the other day, I saw this woman walking in ahead of me, and she looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. And she got into the prescription pharmacy line, and I came around behind her and I put my hand on her arm and I said, I just want you to know I came in behind you and I see you. I see you. She just started crying. I mean, it's not hard if you just show up and you remove as you said before, you remove the barriers that don't allow you to really meaningfully connect with other people. The connection point is always available.
Mm.
And so I love, like, for example, I love going up to couples who are connected. They're holding hands or having clearly a connect conversation. And I come over and say, I want to come over and celebrate your love. And I share something. And invariably, they're always like, thank you so much. And so here's where it gets interesting to your point. I was speaking to a group of 50 state level leaders in a leadership development workshop that I was conducting a couple weeks ago down in San Antonio. And I shared the story of always, celebrating love. And a man in the back sat back and he crossed his arms and he said, you must be really courageous. If somebody did that to me, I'd probably punch him in the face. And I said, well, I walked over to the room and I said, first, if I maybe were to look to approach you, I might maybe notice your energy. And as I got closer, probably wouldn't approach you if I felt like, you really didn't want me there. But I said, I can tell you in all the years I have been doing this, nobody's ever punched me. And every person has thanked me. So I think that was an indication from him of either that's so foreign to me, or I don't can imagine having that kind of love, or I wouldn't want somebody in my space like that. But it said more about him than it did about me, I think.
It's really interesting. I had another guest on the show. His name is Mark Delaney, and he's also somebody that really is authentic and lives aligned to or in line with his purpose. And he does the same thing. He naturally connects with people. And I wonder if this ability comes from being less concerned with the self, because we all are so consumed. When you told me the story, I was thinking, oh my God, what would they say? How would they react if I would be doing this? This sounds weird. Nobody's doing this, right? So all these scripts that we have internalized from our upbringing and society, and what they really are about is not other people. They're about us wanting to persevere some appearance, some image, wanting to be safe, not being rejected, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
And it seems like you were able, through this momentum that had built by following who you are, to not only find that momentum in you and engage in a purposeful way, but with that, like letting go of the ego that might have otherwise blocked you to be in service of other people.
I think you have beautifully articulated that, Ingo. I think that's exactly right. When I'm having these moments where I feel called, compelled to do something for someone, to try to give some kind of encouragement or connection to someone, I am not thinking about myself. I am totally focused on the other people
Mm.
and wanting to do something for them. My intention is to connect, to lift, to provide some kind of goodness. That's what I think people feel first and foremost. That's why nobody's ever punched me. Nobody's ever said, "Get out of here, weirdo." So I think you're right. And it doesn't occur to me. And I know sometimes the people who know me closely might go, gosh, Elise, really? But to me, there's no other way. I want to be a light in the world. And I have been somehow given some gifts and equipped with some things that allow me to do that. And I feel like if I don't do that, I'm not being true to myself. I'm not being true to why I'm here.
Amazing. At least I really love that. And I love how your story shows how you build that courage and that wisdom and started to live your life in a way that was not directed by others, that was not about consuming what was giving, but really forged your own path that is in true alignment with who you are as a person and how you want to engage in the world. Now, before we end, I wonder, somebody listening out there, and there might be where you were when you had your corporate career and they realized that it's not it. There's something missing here. And I wish I had the courage that Alise had. What advice would you give them? Can they start moving in the direction and unfold in living their lives?
Well, I think back to that catalyzing agent that I mentioned before. I think we all need a hand up. I would say that starting first, making sure that you associate with other people who are encouraging for you to explore. Because you're gonna hear from the well-intentioned loved ones, like, "Oh, don't do that. That's not safe. That's not well, there's no money in that, or you can't do this." All the reasons you can't do something. You need to have people also in your corner who are encouraging you to go and explore, to go and look for this stuff. That's critical. So association is number one. And then number two, there's, as you know, a wealth of resources and opportunity, people, coaches, courses for people to start to lean in and see what gets catalyzed from them. And that's why, for example, we started the Gusto Now Academy, which has 9 different learning journeys, and part of them are for the people that are searching. It's too often I hear this when I'm out speaking. People are so aching to discover what are they passionate about, what do they care about, where can they spend their one precious life that would be meaningful for them. But if you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. I mean, how do you get there? And so having something that helps you catalyze to discover and find that path, I think is really important.
What I'm hearing is find your cheerleaders and find your lighthouses.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Mhm.
What is the number one point of contact we want to leave people with if they want to know more about the Academy, about you, about your books and your work?
Well, I'll say 2 things if I can. So the Gusto Now Academy, the best way to find that is to go to gusto-now.com, and then on the training tab, there's a drop down where you can go straight to the Academy. The other thing I would like to offer to listeners and viewers is we developed a Gusto Now Spectrum leadership assessment, and you can find the easiest way to find that is to go to my LinkedIn profile, just Alise Cortez. You'll find my profile, and in the featured section, it says Gusto Leadership Spectrum Assessment. I encourage you to take it. It's free. You're going to learn a ton about yourself in the process of that. So I would send listeners, viewers in those two directions.
Okay, Elise, thank you so much. Thank you for spending the time here with us. I really appreciate having you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation on your podcast.
Me too. Thanks for having me. This has been amazing. Thank you, Ingo.
Thank you.